And we forget that, though, sometimes, right? We forget that it's a process. We forget that it's about the process that we're being invited into. And we get caught up. So sometimes it feels like that. We feel like we're Sisyphus trying to lift something up that hill. And if we're going to stick with the metaphor for my talk today, then the metaphor for my talk today, wasn't that perfect? Right here. Thank you. That's what it can feel like too, right? The storm of life is swirling all around us, and it's pushing us, and it's buffeting us, and it's taking us somewhere, or we are resisting it as we try to not get taken somewhere. So I love this quote because I think it encapsulates what unity actually truly believes. Right? It's the essence of what we understand to be the activity that is happening everywhere. We see things not as they are, but as we are. We see things not as they are, but as we are. And so what does that really mean? What does that really mean in our day-to-day life? Well, it means that when we are this storm-tossed and agitated and in a whirlwind of activity, of emotions, of whatever it is that is arising for us, that means that that's what this becomes for us. That's what we actually experience. So what is your storm? We all have one right now. For some of us, it is truly huge. And for some of us, no matter what, it feels huge. And sometimes it's a bunch of little storms, all circling around you. It's not just sort of one thing. It's this, and then 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 this. And somehow in that, we have this mega storm. You know how they say that hurricanes sort of connect, and they grow, and they become this monster system. And that's really what can happen within us. Because the truth is, I don't know why the clicker is not responsive. The eye of the storm is you. You are the eye of the storm, right? That's you. You are the eye. And what do we know we find in the I am that we are? We just get to exhale. I mean, that's really what happens in the I am, that whatever it is that's been stirred up, whatever it is that is agitated within us, we get to exhale in that moment. So there are some things you learn best in calm and some in storm. There are some things that we can only discover about ourselves in the midst of our seeming challenges. It's actually the challenges that help us to understand that we are actually larger than we think we are. It's actually the storm that actually enables us to grow and evolve, that actually is a trigger mechanism within ourselves. And at the same time, there are certain things that it's just a whole lot easier to begin to access within ourselves if we're actually in the calm. So you've seen this. I mean, right now we have Hurricane Florence is going on, and you watch people, right when all of a sudden there's going to be a hurricane, what does everybody go out and do? Run to buy food and supplies, and like there's this frantic energy that happens because we're not prepared. Because on some level, some part of us wasn't willing to say storms are part of what's going to happen. Now, my father lived in Florida for a long time, and they kind of had it down after a while, because they would get evacuated at least 3 times a year. And they kind of had it down because they lived close to the water. And so even if it was a small storm that was going to come in, there was always danger of the storm surge. And so my stepmother would just have stuff sort of set in the garage. It would be like, we have to evacuate. They just load it up in the car and go. They could literally get out in under a half an hour. Do we do that for ourselves in terms of our spiritual practice? Because our spiritual practice is how we practice, is how we prepare. Our spiritual practice is what allows us to actually be ready. And it is a lot easier to build that muscle of our spiritual practice in the calm than it is to build that muscle in the storm. Having a practice does not mean the absence of storms. I really want to be clear about that. There's this whole sort of idea that if I pray enough or I practice enough or nothing bad is ever going to happen to me. I am going to live a blessed life, Om. That is just not true. But what your spiritual practice will do for you is it will prepare you to be able to meet the storms as they arise. And as you are the eye in the storm, and you bring that to whatever is arising, your experience is transformed. Something new can happen. This is about learning how to stay centered, even when the floodwaters are rising, even when you feel as if you're going under. Your spiritual practice in times of calm is what will enable you to meet the rising flood with grace, with ease, right? Ben is a living example of practice put into practice, right? He's been living into these teachings for how long, Ben? 5 years. He's been living into them and practicing them. And a diagnosis appears in his life. And he meets it from that place of centered awareness, of centered calm. So that while for some people might have been a Hurricane 5, the number's bigger, it's stronger, Category 5 is bigger, right? What's the worst? Category 5? So for some people, that would be a Category 5. And for Ben, it's a Category 1. It's still happening to him. But he is navigating it through the fact that he is accessing what he knows about himself, what he learned about himself, about the divinity that he is, the principles that we can activate in the calm. So the Jewish High Holy Days have been this month. And as most of you know, and as those of you who are watching live streaming will soon learn, Judaism is my birth tradition, right? And the High Holy Days is this very sacred time. It's the new year, which is the Rosh Hashanah, and then there's 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and the next huge sacred holiday, the Holy of Holies, we call it, which is Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur, so within those 10 days, you're going through a process of evaluating and cleansing and looking and being very internal. And the whole culmination on Yom Kippur is about this idea of atonement. It's about the opportunity to look back at what the year was like, to look back at how you showed up, to look back at who you were, and what you manifested in your life. Here at Unity San Francisco, this is our year of manifestation. So what did you manifest? And then atone. So atone carries this tone of like, I did something wrong and I have to make amends. And sometimes we do need to make amends in life for choices that we make. But at atonement, how I hold it, and I'm going to invite you to hold it, is at one-ment. It is our ability to truly stand in our divinity. So all the things that happened to you over the past year, all the things that you're holding against yourself and others, but it's really you, right? They are interfering with your capacity to know you're at one-ment. They are blocks to your capacity to understand that you are the I am. You are the thing itself. And so we step into this Holy of Holy Days as an opportunity to realign with the truth of who we are. And I will be honest, it's not an easy holiday, as you can imagine. You're coming up against yourself. You're coming up against yourself, and you're surrounded by a group of people who are all coming up against themselves together. And you're all doing it in mass. And it's incredibly powerful, but it's also asks something of us, right? So as you step into that place of at-one-ment, all of a sudden perspective begins to appear. So rather than you being buffeted by the storm of whatever the storm is in your life, you can begin to see that it's large, it's just a system that's moving through. It's just a system that's moving through. It's not a constant. It's not who you are. It doesn't define you. It's just something that is moving through. Now, some of those storms, like Florence, are moving through really slowly. But sometimes those things move through really quickly. But the common denominator is they're all moving through. They are not a constant. The I am is your constant. The storm is always going to be changing and shifting. So all of a sudden we get a sense of perspective. And can you see it right there in the center? The center of the storm? What they call the eye of the storm. It is perfect peace. Look at the shot. This is actually, I think this is Hurricane Irma. That's actually like something that flew into the eye of the storm. And it's blue skies. And you can see the storm all around it. But it is not being impacted by it. It is not being buffeted by it. It is not being thrown off of center. The eye of the storm is you. So there is the very famous story of Jesus out in the boat, right? He's sleeping, and the disciples are out there, and they start freaking out because the winds start whipping up, and the storm surge starts happening, and they don't know what to do. And Jesus wakes up, and he rebukes the wind. I love that. He rebukes the wind. And he says to the sea, "Peace, be still." And then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. Now here at Unity, how we hold and anchor all of the wisdom teachings are as metaphysical expressions of an inner experience, of an inner journey. So Jesus woke up. How many times have you felt like you have fallen asleep in your life? Where you fell asleep and things started to slip away from you. Things started to get away from you. Things felt like they were overwhelming you. Consciousness. In consciousness, we wake up. And when we wake up in consciousness, we have the capacity, we have the dominion to rebuke the storm that is arising within ourselves and say, "Peace, be still." Right here. Peace, be still. And the storm within will cease, and there will be calm. This is what our spiritual practice enables us to access, the capacity to know that we can be still, even in the midst of the seeming storms. So this is how I felt when I stepped into Yom Kippur. Just, that's what I felt like I needed to be broken open. The storm felt as if it was still all around me. Can anybody in here relate to that? And I stepped into this space. So there's a tradition in Judaism. So during the holidays, the Torah is read. They actually bring the Torah out and they read portions of the Torah. And there is something called an aliyah, which is where you're invited to rise and stand and be with the reading of the Torah. And the community that I go to for Yom Kippur does this beautiful practice where they sort of tell you what the portion of the Torah is going to be in English so you can actually kind of follow it. And then they invite anybody in the community to come up for the Aliyah who feels connected to what that lesson is. So I felt called, was the second, there's traditional readings and then there's also alternative readings. So this was an alternative readings for those of you who are watching and you know that Exodus is which part about the Levite priests was supposed to be read at Yom Kippur. We were reading the section where you are told to not harvest the corners of your field and to not pick up the gleanings that are left behind when you harvest, so that you can leave them for someone else, for someone who does not have a field, for someone who does not have what you have. And so the rabbi said, whoever in here feels as if they're afraid to share like that, whoever in here is feeling stingy, he actually said that word. Whoever in here feels as if somehow they don't have enough to give and are holding back in some way, do you have the courage to stand for this Aliyah? And it was like my body just stood up, and it was very vulnerable to stand up and own in front of an entire room of people that I was feeling mean in spirit, that I was feeling close in spirit, that somehow I had not been fully stepping out and sharing of myself, fully, really fully, that I was somehow watching the corners of my fields, like, I might need those. I think I'm going to need that. That is not living into the prosperity consciousness that we hold here at Unity San Francisco. It's not living into an abundance consciousness that we hold here in San Francisco. It's not living fully into the idea of service, truly being of service to the world, which we hold here at Unity San Francisco. But I felt that space within me that wasn't in alignment with what I want to be aligned with. And so I stood for the Aliyah. Aliyah, literally in Hebrew, can be translated into rising, to rise. And this is what we are called to do all the time, to step through the thing that we think we are, to step through the shame about who we think we're not, or who we are and we wish we weren't, and to actually step forward and say, I am choosing anew. I am choosing anew from the very center of my being, from the very core of who I am. Let the seeming hurricane rage all around me. I am choosing from that space within myself. Rising in consciousness, rising in love. And yes, is it going to stretch us? Whew, I hope so. Because otherwise, how do we grow? How do we grow if we aren't willing to face those places and spaces within ourselves that make us uncomfortable? So a huge component of Yom Kippur is forgiveness. We have to forgive ourselves. We have to forgive ourselves for all the ways we think we failed. We have to forgive ourselves for all the ways that we somehow aren't showing up the way we supposed to show up. Because let me be clear, whether or not I was being mean in my spirit and not fully giving, I felt like I was. And that's what needed to be addressed. My understanding of myself. Can you feel into that with me? I needed to forgive myself. Forgive myself for all the ways that I might have said, oh, I don't want to do that. I needed to forgive myself for that piece. Compassion. We have to meet ourselves in compassion in all of this. Because otherwise, it gets ugly real fast. We have to hold ourselves in compassion, and others too, because we're all out there doing the best we can, living into it as fully as we can. Humility. I was certainly humbled as I stood up there for that aliyah, and I am happy to say that I was not alone when I stood up for that, right? I was not alone, because none of us are ever alone. We think we are. We think it's only me. We think I'm the exception, and that's just not true. So we come together like we do here in community, and we get to recognize that I'm not alone in this. I have my own experience, but I'm not alone in this. And then the last one is courage. Do you have the courage to face yourself? Do you have the courage to meet yourself in compassion? Right? All of us are probably very well adept at meeting ourselves with derision and scorn and judgment. But can you have the courage to meet yourself in compassion? So the Baal Shem Tov is a very famous Hasidic rabbi, has this story that I want to share with you about the heavenly court. So you die, and you find yourself at the heavenly court. And the heavenly court takes you in and says, we need you to do a little bit of work for us. We're gonna show you a person's life. And we want you to basically judge them as to what their experience now that they have passed on is going to be. And so you watch this person's life, and then you make your judgment. Because you have passed away, you don't know that you're actually looking at your own life. Whatever judgment you're placing is actually what you're placing for yourself. And so his teaching is, those who practice forgiveness and compassion have a distinct advantage. Might as well start now. Might as well start now. Because that's all that happens in our judging, when we shut ourselves down like that. We're closing ourselves off from the divinity that we are. We are literally placing a barrier between ourselves and our understanding of the I am that is trying to express as our life. So, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through rivers they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned. The flame shall not consume you. So again, we are doing the understanding and unity is that where is this I that is speaking? It's right here. The I that is speaking is right here. When I pass through the waters, I will be with me. Through the rivers, they're not going to overwhelm me. When I walk through fire, I will not be burned. The flame shall not consume me, because I am centered and anchored in the very eye of the storm, the very I am that I am. And from this space, there is only peace, that stillness, that centeredness. So my invitation is practice now, practice often, practice, practice, practice. Because this is what you're invited into. The eye of the storm is you. The stillness that is seeking to express as your life will support you regardless of what is arising around you. It will anchor you. It will allow you to truly heal in ways that you can't even imagine right now. So let's practice together. Let's take this into our time of meditation.